Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Golfing Greenkeeper podcast. My name is Steve Smith and I am your host, as you would always expect, which is a great thing from my end, so I appreciate you coming in and listening. I've got something new for you. This is a new expanded version of the design brief. Without any further ado, this is episode number 67. Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you to the new expanded version of the design brief on the Golfing Greenkeeper podcast. You're going to have fun with this one. I'm going to be chatting with members of the Society of Australian Golf Course Architects and expose the names and the businesses and who they are and where they've worked and all that sort of stuff. So you get to learn, that's the aim of the game, and pique your interest in the world of architecture, golf course architecture, certainly in Australia. We're going to talk about all the different people and where they've worked around the world. And I'm going to start off with this one. The expanded version goes straight to a guy by the name of Davey from Contour Golf. Ben, welcome to the Golfing Greenkeeper podcast.
Thank you, Steve. It's a pleasure to be on and to be I'm the first architect, am I?
Mate, you are on this expanded version. I have had Harley Cruz on here before, but this is a little bit different. This is going to be talking about your background, where you guys have worked, and we're going to get into some of the details of some of the places that you worked and the design, and pick your brains about a few bits and pieces, mate, and have a good discussion about some things. And we're trying to educate listeners as well when they're out there on the golf course, the things they're going to see, places that you might have done work on, things that they can look into when they're out there playing golf and going, okay, well, that green has 47 bunkers around it. Why is that, or why has that only got one? And they're the things that we want to try and learn and educate people along the way, mate. So it's, mate, you are the first on the new expanded version. So it's uncharted waters.
Well, I feel quite honoured, Steve.
Mate, I'm excited to have you break the ice for everyone in the society, which is really good. And I always ask this: have you been on a podcast before, mate?
No, I haven't actually, Steve. I've been waiting for you to call me.
I love it, mate. That's very good to hear. Very good. So, mate, you are an icebreaker. So let's and I'm going to do an icebreaker to start this one. So it's the new design brief, and I'm going to call it's the Fast Five. 5 quick short answer questions relating to architecture and golf course design. Are you ready to go with these ones? No one knows them. No one's heard them before. So this is a world first.
Okay, I'm ready, Steve.
All right. So the first question is your preferred grass type to see on a golf course.
I don't think you can go past Cooch. You know, the way Cooch is presented on, like the Melbourne Sandbelt, nothing beats that. Very
good to hear, mate. We might discuss some of these later on. It's quick, short answers, so I'll keep moving. Number 2, and some people the listeners might have heard these questions a little bit before in my Keeper of the Green segment, so some are going to cross over, but I'm curious to hear the differences with architects and designers and with superintendents and greenkeepers. So this is good. So number 2, stripes or no stripes on fairways for presentation?
I think I'm a no stripes person. I think it's a nice, cleaner look, more natural look, not striping fairways.
Okay, good to hear. Now, number 3, your favourite type of par 4, a cool short par 4 or a challenging long par 4?
Definitely for me, a cool short par 4.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice, I like it. I think that's going to be popular with architects. So maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but I'm working on that one. Now, number 4, favourite bunker style. Kingston Heath, and this is all Australian, it's multiple choice. Kingston Heath, the beautiful earthy tones of Royal Adelaide, as I love to say, or the bright white of the Australian?
Oh, I'd definitely go Kingston Heath, I would say, on a sand site, obviously.
Yep.
If it was a clay site, then it wouldn't be Kingston Heath, obviously. It'd be something more like, I really like the stuff that Tom Doak did at Concord, something much simpler.
There's an interesting one. I did see Concord soon after it had opened, and I was really intrigued by the style of bunkers. They're very different. I don't know how they are a number of years on. I haven't been back, but yes, very interesting. I like the answer, mate. Well done. Well done.
Simple and elegant.
Yeah, very well described. I love it. See, this is already educating us. We're already learning. I love it, Ben. Thanks. Now, number 5, the final one. One of your favourite golf courses by design in the world. Now, I know that's a big question, but off the top of your head, what's something by design that you think of and you just go, that for me is a great one? It doesn't need to be your number one, just a great one.
Oh, I visited Dornoch up in North Scotland a few years. That's almost the perfect golf course in my view.
Wow.
So I'll say Royal Dornoch.
Okay, very good. Well, there's one that we may not have heard of. I certainly haven't discussed because it is an All-Australian, but I like to hear. We like to learn. So, mate, that's one we can look into at our leisure when we sitting in front of the computer if we're not lucky to be travelling around that part of the world. So, very good, mate. Thank you for taking part in the Fast Five, the first time, Ben. I think they're all very interesting questions, and I certainly like to hear those ones, which is great. Now, mate, let's get stuck into who Ben Davey is. Let's get stuck into contour golf. Let's get stuck into the architecture discussions that we can have here. And let's start off with, I want you to tell us a bit about your career, Ben, as a golf course architect, sort of up to date in terms of where you've worked in the past and who you've worked with throughout your career getting to where you are today. Can you give us a bit of a background run? And look, don't be shy. There's going to be a bit in that, I've got no doubt, and I think you've worked in plenty of places. So, mate, can you maybe start off with how you got into where you got your first start as an architect?
Yeah, well, I guess I'm originally from Melbourne. I'm living in the ACT at the moment, but I was brought up playing, firstly, a little golf course down on the Mornington Peninsula where we used to holiday, which is the Flinders Golf Course.
Oh, okay.
Flinders Golf Course is pretty much how I first was exposed to golf. And from there, it just kind of grew. And from the age of 13, I started studying golf courses and drawing golf courses and just loving the subject of golf and, living in Melbourne and being able to visit places like Royal Melbourne and where my aunt was lucky enough to be a member. So being exposed to that at a young age, I just really became interested in golf courses and golf course design.
Wow. That's really cool. And mate, if I could just jump in quickly, that Flinders, from memory, that had the touch of Alistair Mackenzie there. Was it for a very early period during his visit to Oz?
Well, I think he visited there. How much influence he actually had,
okay.
I think he prepared a plan, some of which was implemented, but I don't think that he could claim that as one of his designs from what I've seen.
Okay, fair enough.
I played that course probably more than any course on the planet. So I know every cranny of Flinders Golf Course and, other courses I used to play as a kid, like good old Burnley, Royal Burnley we used to call it, in the inner suburb of Richmond or...
Okay.
So always fascinated by golf, always fascinated by golf courses and golf landscapes as well. But to answer your question, the way I got into golf course design was really, really fortunate in a way. It was luck. I spent a couple of years overseas doing the kind of backpacker thing and travelled around Europe and America and got back to Australia having done a science degree before I took 2 years off. And I was studying urban planning at Melbourne University, and I was also working part-time in a restaurant.
Right.
In Camberwell, which is an inner suburb of Melbourne. And the boss said to me one day, "So, Ben, what do you want to do with your life?" And I said, "Oh, look, I don't really know, but I've always been fascinated by golf course design, but I've got no idea how I'd get into it." And he said to me, "Oh, we've got a regular customer that I think is a golf course architect."
I can't wait to hear the rest of this.
I can't remember his name, but I'll try to find out what his name is. And a couple of days later, he said, "Oh, his name's Tony Cashmore." He comes in quite regularly. I think I've got his phone number because he made a booking a few weeks ago. I've got his phone number in the bookings book. So he called Tony Cashmore and he said, "Look, I've got this young bloke that says he wants to design golf courses. Is there any chance he could come and have a chat to you?" And that's how I met Tony Cashmore.
Wow. So let me just I'm digesting that one. Let me get this right. So you're working in a restaurant, having a conversation with your boss about golf course architecture, and neither of you have got any any background in that.
No, that's exactly right. Yeah, Tony Cashmore was a regular. He used to pop in there for his morning coffee.
Wow.
And so I went and met Tony. And
Wow.
the rest is pretty much history. But
That-
I started working. Tony kind of threw me in the deep end. At the time, it was 1996, I think. And Tony was in the process of building the Dunes golf links down on.
Oh, okay. Now that's a great golf course.
Yeah, so he'd built. I think they'd done about half of it because there was an original golf course there before he did the Dunes
Right.
called Limestone Ridge.
Okay.
So a guy, Duncan Andrews, purchased that golf course in the mid-90s, and then Tony rebuilt the whole place basically. So he was in the process of doing the Dunes.
Wow.
So that was really exciting. So I remember. I think when I started working for Tony, they were in the process of rebuilding the 18th green.
Wow. There you go.
Really, really exciting project to be involved in. And then after that, we did a project down on the Bellarine Peninsula, 13th Beach.
Yes.
We first of all did the beach course, and then worked with Nick Faldo on the creek course.
Mate. So can I ask? So you've jumped in from nowhere, from working in a
Very much.
restaurant, and you've gone to the Dunes with Tony Cashmore design, to the Dunes, and then to 13th Beach, and then with Nick Faldo involved as well. Is that have I got the crux of that?
Yeah, I kind of had to pinch myself back then. It was shocking times. So, but we were working on a number of other smaller projects around Melbourne. One of the ones that I probably had the most involvement in was there's a little public golf course called Ivanhoe Public Golf Course.
Okay, yeah, I've heard of that one.
Which is on the Yarra River in Melbourne.
Yep, it's just out the east side. It's the city, isn't it? Up the Yarra.
Yeah, there's a whole group of courses through there. They call it the Clay Belt. Is
Right.
Referred to in Melbourne.
Okay.
As opposed to the Sand Belt. Yeah, there's Kew Golf Club, Green Acres, Latrobe, and Ivanhoe.
Yeah, right. Okay.
So it was a public course, and that was a council job basically, and we rebuilt all 18 greens.
Right.
So while Tony was off doing exciting things at 13th Beach and the Dunes, I was looking after Ivanhoe, which wasn't quite as exciting, but it really threw me in the deep end, I guess, and had to learn about greens construction and what worked from a design point of view and what didn't work, and how drainage worked and contours, etc. So, yeah, that was probably my first job that I had some real responsibility for, I guess.
Still pretty bloody impressive, if I'm being honest. I mean, you the early days into, like you said, your career, and then you've still got all 18 greens. I mean, that's a big deal.
Yeah, well, when I say I designed all 18 greens, I did all the drawings for the 18 greens.
Yeah.
And Tony Cashmore, in typical fashion, would amend things on site during construction often, as we do as golf course architects.
Yep.
But, those 18 greens are still there today, so I'll have to get there and have a look at it one day.
Cool. I know. One of my followers, actually, we were just chatting about Ivanhoe the other day. So there you go. Okay. Very good. So, okay, so what year, what era, what time are we talking about, mate? Roughly when are we talking here?
This is kind of the late 90s.
Okay.
My 13th Beach was finished the late 90s. Tony kind of went a bit quiet then after 13th Beach opened, and I actually went off and worked for a landscape architect just to do something completely different out of the golf field for about 2.5 years.
Okay.
Really good experience.
Yep.
Then after about 2003, I think it was, I got a phone call. Actually, the landscape architect that I was working with was the landscape architect for the Heritage Golf Course out in the Yarra Valley.
Yep.
And coincidentally, Tony Cashmore had just been appointed the golf course architect to design the second course there, which is called the Henley course.
Right.
And the first course was done by Nicholas.
That's a St. John course, is that right?
Yeah, that's the one on the north side of the river.
Yep.
So he'd just been appointed to do that, and I was the landscape architect for the hotel that they were building at Heritage, and I still remember this too because it was kind of like the opening day for turning the first sod of dirt to build the golf course, and we went on a hot air balloon trip over the Yarra Valley.
Wow!
And happened to be in the basket of this hot air balloon with James Cashmore. Now, James Cashmore is Tony Cashmore's son.
Okay.
And James had become involved in the business, and they were looking at opportunities in Asia, namely China.
Yep.
And he said, "Why don't you come in and have a chat to me one day, and we'll see if we can get you involved again." And so I went back 2.5 years later and started working for Tony Cashmore again.
Wow.
With a focus more on Asian work. We did the Henley course in the Yarra Valley, but then it was really all about China.
And that was that we talked about Tony Cashmore Design. They're looking to expand. Asia and China was probably driven by China at that time. Was really starting to move, wasn't it? I mean, that was if anyone was looking to design golf courses, that was where you were going to go at some point. Yeah,
around the kind of 2005 to 2010, China was just booming. It was, I think, at one point there was like 150 golf courses under construction per annum.
Wow.
So everybody was over there working. All the big names, Nicholas and Faldo and others, Greg Norman.
Yep.
And James Cashmore didn't know a lot about golf course design, but he knew a lot about running a business, and he knew a lot about marketing.
Yep.
And he was able to get Cashmore in there, and we did a lot of work. We were very successful. The Beijing Golf Show every year used to be the biggest golf show in the world, and you'd walk into the Beijing Golf Show, and there would be Nicholas's booth, and then Faldo's booth, and next to that would be Tony Cashmore's booth.
Well, you got to be in the mix, haven't you?
Well, that's right. James Cashmore knew that, and he managed to get Tony in there, and we did a lot of work. We did a lot of master plans. Not all of them were built.
Sure.
The first course I really was heavily involved in China was in Beijing, a place called Jade Lake, and it was a dead flat site, terrible site really, completely treeless, probably 0.5 metre of elevation change over a kilometre or more.
Yeah, right. Definition of flat, Jade Lake.
Very average. And so we manufactured a golf course out of that, a lot of cut and some serious earthworks. I think we moved close to 1 million cubic metres of dirt.
Wow, is that all? Is it?
Lake.
I'm maybe it's a bit early to jump in, but I'm going to jump in just the same, mate, because I get the impression, and I've read a lot of stuff about the Asian market, the Chinese golf courses, and like you mentioned, lots of Australian architecture firms. I know I've done some work over there, and lots of Australian architects over the years. I get the impression that there's a lot of and maybe it's unfair to put it across everything, but very built, manufactured golf courses. Was it at that time when things were being built, they're essentially building cities and they're expanding and so much happening, were some of the golf course works, it wasn't about being on great land. It was just, here's the land, this is where we're going to put a golf course, make it happen, and you make a master plan around that. Is that how some of them or a lot of them were working?
I think the problem with building golf courses in China was they had some strict rules about what land you could and couldn't use.
Okay.
Basically, if it was arable land, farming land, you couldn't touch it.
Right.
The only sites available were really bad sites, generally speaking. So, mountains or dead flats. So,
okay, fair enough. Okay, yep.
I had one site up in the north of China once, which was inland, but it was quite unique. It was all sand, but that's the only really good site I've probably ever worked with in China, unfortunately.
So it was a rarity.
Finding a good site in China is a rarity, yeah. Some of them are really challenging, mountainous usually. So
Okay.
yeah, so there was a lot of kind of manufactured stuff built in the 2000s, and the clients over there, we had to educate a lot of the clients. Their perception of what a golf course should be sometimes wasn't ideal. So, getting them away from white sand, for example, was nearly an impossibility.
Is that driven by? Look, mate, I don't know. I suppose this is an open question to you. Is it driven by what is seen on television to be a good golf course? Sometimes is it driven by their culture? I don't know that the Asian cultures and the way they view that sort of stuff is. What do you think was behind that viewpoint?
Oh, I definitely think there's the Augusta factor.
Right. Okay.
Bright green grass, white sand. And lots of water.
So like a lot of general board, I'm going to discriminate here and say a lot of board members in some of the smaller clubs around Australia, I've worked with them, so I can say that.
Yes. Well, there's a certain amount of truth to that. I think Australia is definitely a more educated golf market than China was back then.
Yeah, that's fair. Interesting. So over there with Tony Cashmore Design, how long were you working over there for? Have you got any interesting, how many golf courses did you end up being part of over there, and how long were you there for?
Well, with Cashmore, between about 2005 and 2009, when I left, we did that course in Beijing, which was 18 holes. We did a rebuild of a course down in Guangzhou, which is the far south, near Hong Kong, course called Foshan. I think Foshan's hosted a couple of China PGA Tour events.
Yeah, righto.
And then we did another one in South Korea as well. And that one came about because the owner of that golf course actually went and played the dunes.
Right.
Their son or daughter was at university in Melbourne. And they went and played the dunes and then went into the pro shop and said, who designed this golf course? It's Tony Cashmore. And they ended up building a golf course in a small city called Daegu, which is in South Korea, south of Seoul. And that was almost the opposite of that Beijing site. This was
right.
Probably even worse, more difficult. It was
I thought you were going to say it was better.
No, it was literally on the side of a mountain.
Wow.
So, yeah, with probably over 100 meters of elevation change.
Does that bring, as an architect, you talk about how difficult or in inverted commas bad the site is. I think about being on the side of a mountain and people that I know that aren't golfers and look at pictures of those sorts of golf courses, go, oh my, look at that, just is incredible. If I go somewhere, I've got to play that one, or I've got to go and have a look, or they're golfers that travel around. Is that, when you talk about it being a bad side, is the finished product so dramatic it's incredible, but actually getting to finish and build the golf course is what makes it hard?
Well, yeah, I think you can do great things with mountainous sites if you have enough land available. But the other problem with this site was it just wasn't big enough to really much with, because we basically had to run all the holes along the contour, along the side of the mountain, and then kind of, in order to get them flat enough, we had to kind of terrace between holes.
Okay. So very manufactured.
Yeah, it was. We then planted out these kind of terrace slopes as much as possible, but just to get the width we wanted on fairway, fairway plus rough on each side, we wanted kind of 50 to 60 meters minimum before the drop off, if you like.
Wow.
So, look, the end result was good. There's some spectacular views there, some really good green sites. So, look, the course ended up great, but it was just a really challenging site to work with.
Yeah, no doubt. Trying to build a golf, I think about where we see golf courses. I'm on the northern beaches of Sydney, and lots of golf courses along the strip, and in those sorts of flattish type-ish areas. And then you're building one on the side of a mountain.
Yeah.
Very different. Very different. So that's so South Korea was in part of your time over there in Asia.
Yeah, so that was around 2007, and then we did Foshan. And then in 2009, I became a little bit disillusioned, I guess, and thought I probably knew too much, and basically packed up my bags and left.
Right.
And not only did I leave, I kind of took the Asia business manager with me. So I was
okay.
I wasn't overly popular at that time with James Cashmore, especially because the Asian business manager, he's a Chinese Australian citizen, but obviously fluent in Mandarin. He's from Shanghai originally. His name's Joseph Shi. Joseph had worked with Thomson Perrott for a few years in China and helped them out during the 90s as an interpreter. And then he was working with Cashmore as well. And I got to know Joseph very well. We spent a lot of time together. And so we left together and formed a new business. And Joseph had also been working with Bob Shearer, the ex-professional golfer.
Right.
So Bob Shearer had been working at Thomson Perrott and done some stuff in China with them. And then he'd done a golf course on his own as well in Beijing, working with Joseph. So Joseph's strong recommendation to me was that I needed someone more senior to work with if I was going to form my own business.
Okay.
So he suggested Bob Shearer. So I formed a new business. At that time, it was called Davey Shearer Golf Design. So I was the sole director of the company, so I kind of employed Bob and paid him a commission to work with me, and we ended up doing a lot of work in China as well. Probably 80 or 90% of my work was in China back then.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so we did a course. I was only about 36 or 37 then, I think, and thrown into the deep end with a new project up in the far north of China in a province called Liaoning, where they'd actually started building a golf course, and the owner was concerned about the design that I think a local Chinese company had designed it. So the first time I went there, it was a small city called Fushan, which is in Liaoning, which is probably 1,000 kilometers north of Beijing.
Jeez. Yep.
So I got there in the middle of winter. It was about minus 18.
What, Celsius?
Celsius.
Holy strip. How far north is this?
This is up above kind of North Korea.
My Lord.
Yeah.
Mate, look, I'm pretending I know what I'm hearing from you. I've got no idea about the Asian region. But if you're talking about minus 18, was it elevated above sea level as well? What the hell?
No, it's just extreme cold up there. Yeah, so the first time I got to this site, it was under snow. We'd left Melbourne. It was December, I think. So left here in the summer, landed there. It's minus 18. We get to the site with Bob. Bob was with me. And they'd started building this golf course, and they were basically moving a river. There was a river flowed through the site, and it was about 80 metres wide, frozen solid. And they had these excavators there smashing up the ice. And they were next door to the golf course. The same developer was building a theme park, like a Disneyland type theme park. And in order for his theme park and hotel to work, they needed this river moved. So some of the golf holes there were built on 8 metres of fill.
Wow.
Yeah, so some of the holes are now where the river used to be. So, yeah, it was pretty exciting.
I'm my brain is Sorry to jump in again. My brain is trying to get my head around what you just said. Because when you were saying, I thought you were sort of metaphorically speaking with that, oh, they're just moving a river. They actually moved the river.
Well, they diverted the river.
Yeah, and moved from where it was going, where it once was, to somewhere else so they could fit what they needed to. Because we don't really get that type of thing happening here, do we?
No, we don't. And that's what was so exciting about it, was the scale of the projects and the scale of what they thought was achievable in
That's
terms
enormous.
of moving dirt, etc.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was an interesting site. It was kind of a site in two halves. Half the site was really good.
Okay.
It was kind of undulating and pine forest and birch. And through that land, we didn't really need to move any dirt at all. And then the other half of the site was dead flat, kind of adjacent to this river, and was huge earthworks.
You had to make something out of it, something good.
Yeah. So, and then, the hotel that this developer built was just extraordinary. You have to see it to believe it. It looked like the castle in Disneyland.
Yeah.
It looked like that, but it was about 10 times bigger with all these turrets and stuff on the top of it. So
can I ask a silly question? Do you look back at some of these? I know we haven't finished talking about China, but I'm thinking you look at that. Are they still there? I don't know how the Chinese market works. We hear about things going up and down in parts of the world when it comes to golf developments and things like that. Is China under the same forces? Do they come and then some of them disappear after 10 years or 20 years? And do you look back and see them, or how they're going?
Well, I'm always intrigued by going to Google Earth and seeing what these projects look like.
You and me both, mate. I love that.
Yeah. And that particular project is still there. So that's still going.
Wow.
But I went back there a few years ago, actually, and did another little course for that same developer. I did like a putting course as part of his theme park.
Right.
So that one's still there, but that course, that never really opened to the public.
Okay.
That was just a developer that I think his hotel guests can play it, and some of his business friends.
Wow.
And that's so you don't hear about a lot of these courses over there.
That's unreal. Very, very different.
Yeah, and then I'm sticking to the China theme. I did another course with Bob down at a city called Putian, which is basically on the Taiwan Straits in Fujian province. So that was a 27-hole development, and that was not a bad site. It was pretty mountainous, but it had some nice long valleys that we used, and I believe that course is still there too.
Wow, okay. So, mate, if I can, because I do want to talk about a lot of other things with you, and I suppose I'm hearing there's a lot of experience gained in your time over there working in and around China and Asia. That by the sounds of it, that seems like you've done a lot of work, master planning, building, construction, -18, moving rivers. I mean, that sounds like there's a lot to be put under your belt through your time over there in China. Would that be fair?
Absolutely. I learned a hell of a lot over there. I think just the scale of the projects and the amount of dirt that's moved on some of them taught me a lot. So,
interesting. Yeah. Very interesting. So overall, mate, how long were you in China working? And like you mentioned, you're still doing some over there from time to time, but you were more or less working there full time, I take it, the time coming back to Australia every now and then?
Yeah, the last job, it all kind of went pear-shaped in China around 2014.
Right.
There was a change of government. Xi Jinping came in. They basically cracked down on illegal golf developments, and there was a lot of bad stuff happening. I think with most sites in China, you've got to relocate farmers, etc., or sometimes even whole towns for these projects to proceed. And
wow,
I think a lot of developers were doing the wrong thing, cutting down trees illegally, etc. So around 2014, the new Chinese government did basically an audit of every golf course in China.
Wow.
And they kind of ranked for them. They, out of the 700 odd courses, they said, okay, those 400, they're okay, they can stay open. These 150 have to, renovate things or fix things that they did wrong. And then they actually shut down about another 100 courses, or possibly more than 100.
Really? So just these are the rules. This is the line in the sand, guys. This is how it's working from here on in.
Yeah, they shut down over 100. They also basically cancelled all new developments. So we had a course under construction in Hubei province, and it just literally stopped overnight.
Wow.
Yeah, and so that was basically the end of it. Went from boom to bust literally overnight with the change of government in around 2014.
Wow.
I did have a project there around 2018 on Hainan Island, which is far south of China. It's an island in the South China Sea.
Yep.
And we actually grassed, I think, 12 or 14 holes there. Finished, shaped grass growing in, and then that was shut down too. So,
oh wow,
that would have been a good one, because that was a good site, and I did some really good stuff there, I think, in terms of the shaping and some really good green complexes. So that was really disappointing for that one to shut down. So that was 2018, and basically since then there's been no work for anyone in China.
Oh, wow. So there really was this massive period where, like I said before, I heard of the big name architecture firms in Australia, and certainly a lot of Australian architects working over there in some capacity. And you mentioned the Normans and the Faldos and all that sort of stuff. So it was big. And then it became, well, I suppose politics changes a lot of things in the way that we can do business and that. So that changed. And then it literally, the hammer comes down, and that's it. It's full stop.
Pretty much, yeah. I'm not aware of anything happening over there now.
Wow. Okay.
Of course, there's still people playing golf, and there's still courses that are open.
Yeah, sure.
But in terms of new developments, I'm not aware of anything in China, and nothing's happened there for several years.
Wow.
So,
okay. And mate, I'm going to ask you. You mentioned there earlier on that you were part of a lot of master planning, and some of those don't get off the ground. They don't even get started. How does an architect feel like yourself? I know how I can feel when the golf course that I was looking after closes down and disappears and is no longer with us. It made me feel, I spent 10 years of my blood, sweat and tears in building up a golf course at Katoomba in the Blue Mountains, only for it to disappear to become a grass paddock. What's it feel like? You mentioned Hainan Island. As an architect, and you're excited about a project, it's going really well, it's going to be something special. The hammer comes down to be no more. What's that feel like? Is there a sense of an attachment, emotional attachment, like I had with Katoomba? Is that what you have with these babies, up in inverted commas, of yours that you're building around the place? Do you feel a little bit empty every now and then when one disappears?
Well, I think with that Hainan job, because I put a lot of time and effort into it, just working out the details of how bunkers are going to be finished, and I spent a lot of time personally in bunkers with a shovel and shaping them up and getting them perfect.
Yeah, right.
And you have a vision for what things are going to look like once they've all grown in and then opened. And to be able to see that come to fruition is very disappointing. Absolutely.
Yeah. No, the reason I ask is, like I said, for me, it was gut-wrenching when you put so much effort in. And like you said, it's about seeing the vision. You're looking at the end and going, this is where it's going to be. I can see it. I can feel it. We're getting there. We're on that road. It's coming. And then out of nowhere, the axe falls and you just go, well, what the hell? And it just leaves you feeling really, I felt really empty. And I was curious from an architect's point of view, and I might be presuming, I assume it's not your only one that's happened to because of the business that you're in. Do you get attached to those golf courses sometimes? Yeah,
you absolutely do. Yeah, I mean, I'd love to be able to go back to China and go and visit these places again.
Yeah, right.
As I mentioned in Phuthi, and I haven't been there, they hosted a China PGA tournament in 2016, I think it was, and I went over for that just to see how it played.
Yep.
Winning score was, I think it was -3.
Yeah, wow. So it's held up well?
Yeah, well, it's a tough golf course. It's mountains and it's pretty long.
Yeah, right. There you go.
Part of the client's brief was he wanted a 250-yard par 3, a 500-yard par 4, and a 600-yard par 5. That's the kind of mentality.
Is that And I go back to the culture and their view on golf, and it's a China flavour. I say this about golf when you travel around the world, and even within Australia, because we're so vast and we've got so many different environments. That's their version of golf, and it doesn't mean I like to say that it doesn't mean it's right or wrong. It's just different, and if you want to go and experience it, you can go over there and do so. And the same with when they travel to Australia, they come here to play our courses for our flavour of golf. Is that's their view, that they like these long holes, really difficult stuff? Is that what they like some of the time?
I think so, and there's a lot of competitiveness, I think, between golf developers over there as well. It's like, oh, my par five's longer than yours. Are
you sure that's the only thing they're measuring?
Well, so yeah, and just the golfing culture there too is different. They don't the club environment's very different to in Australia, where we have kind of Saturday Stableford competitions, or you go and play par or
Don't start me on Saturday Stablefords. That gets me angry.
Over there, it's all about, there's a lot of gambling involved.
Oh, okay.
They like playing with their friends and playing for houses. So.
Yeah, well, and they probably, when I sit there and have a joke with my friends, or go and play with my brother, and we'll just throw a fiver around, whatever. They over there are playing for sheep stations.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's turn the page on your China, because that sounds like it was a very, very big deal in your career, and you learned a lot with Bob Shearer as well, working there, and part of that second stanza, if you like, of your architecture time over there in China. You've got a lot under your belt, working with different people in different places and all sorts of things. So, how is now the right time to ask you, how and when does Contour Golf come about?
Yeah, well, that happened in, I think it was 2016.
Okay.
Bob and I, I really enjoyed working with Bob. He passed away, unfortunately, this year, but we had some wonderful times together over in China, and Bob was an important part of the business. But when China kind of came to an end, I kind of felt that I needed to just, obviously focus more on Australia. Yep. And Bob and I decided to part ways in 2016. So I kind of rebranded the business, I guess, and I ummed and ahed about whether to use my own name, as most golf course architects do. But yep. Out of respect to Bob as well, to go from Davey Shearer to Davey, I just felt I wanted to really start again with a kind of more of a generic name. So I came up with Contour Golf Design Group, and so it was really just a case of renaming the company, and I did that in 2016. And since then, I've just been working on my own and just focusing far more on Australia.
Okay, so I'll probably jump into, you can tell us and fill in a little bit of the time. So I know, and you started off with that you've not long ago relocated to the ACT. So you're based in Canberra with the family, and I look at some of the work you've done in there that you've recently been engaged with, I should say, to start off with, at Yirwani and Murrumbidgee. Now they're local in around Canberra, but you mentioned 2016 was the change to Contour Golf. You've come back to Australia focus. I think you were in Melbourne prior to that. Were you back home down in Melbourne after you come back from China?
Yeah, we were living down on the Mornington Peninsula.
Okay.
Mount Martha, which is about an hour from the centre of Melbourne.
Right. And then you did some being based out of Melbourne. I assume get back into work and those types of things. Where did you do a bit of work from before you relocated to Canberra?
Well, probably my biggest job in Melbourne at that time was Mornington Golf Club, which was Mornington's only kind of a 10-minute drive up the road from where I was living in Mount Martha.
Right.
The way I became involved at Mornington was through Darius Oliver.
Okay.
So Darius, he's got the Planet Golf website and was involved with Cape Wickham, etc.
Yep.
He became involved there. They wanted to build a new par 3 and have a 19th hole.
All right.
So Darius contacted me, and so we ended up around 2016 doing a full kind of course master plan for the redevelopment of the course. And then we built this new par 3, which is referred to as the 19th hole, on this spectacular site right on Port Phillip Bay. It's interesting because Mornington Golf Club, of all the courses in Melbourne, it's the only one that actually has direct sea frontage onto Port Phillip Bay.
Oh, really? It's that close? I've not been there.
Yeah, it's right on some cliffs in Mornington. Mornington Golf Course is kind of built on top of a hill, I guess. So, there's some really good holes there, but there were some really flawed holes there too. Some of it's quite steep. There's about 3 holes in particular. The 4th and the 6th are the worst, which are really built on the side of a hill, and the 4th is probably even worse than the 6th. I'll tell you in a moment about what we've done with the 6th hole, but the 4th hole, it's so steep that you really can't hold the fairway.
Okay, so side hill lie we're talking?
Side hill, yeah. So it tilts from high right to low left, and especially in summer, you just can't hold the fairway. So the golf club, in their wisdom, went and built some of those little dinky mounds down the low side of the fairway to try and stop balls. So the master plan looked at addressing those issues, fixing those 3 or 4 holes in particular.
Yep.
But building that 19th hole on the cliff, that was the first project, and it's a spectacular green site. It's you're basically right on the edge of the cliff, looking across the bay with kind of 180-degree views.
Wow. That's impressive for down the Mornington, because down the Mornington Peninsula, I say southeast of Melbourne, because it's not known for being elevated, like you said earlier. It's so if you're up and you've got a view over Port Phillip Bay, and I've seen a couple of photos. You mentioned the work you've done on the 6th, and I know you've done some around the 7th tee, and we'll talk about that. But some of the photos I've seen from that, it just looks sensational. Yeah,
well, Mornington's always been kind of a poor cousin to some of the other courses down on the peninsula. The further down you go, the kind of the sandier the soil gets, and Mornington's kind of where the clay ends, and then a few kilometres further on, it becomes sand.
Okay.
Mornington's kind of built on clay, whereas down at Sorrento, Portsea, Rosebud, obviously the National and Dunes, that's all sand dunes.
Yep.
Yeah, so Mornington on clay, so they have drainage issues, and the way you build the greens is obviously completely different to down on the sand. So it's always been a bit of a poor cousin, but it's a spectacular golf course and underrated.
Indeed, and then we talk about spectacular. So I'm going to jump in and ask you to sort of, and we'll come back to Canberra a little bit in a minute, but I'm going to ask you about the 6th hole and what some of the detail of the work was. What was the goal of that work on the 6th? And you mentioned the side hill lies and that sort of stuff. So I'm just curious to hear about the goal behind that work. What were you trying to achieve and get out of the adjustments to the 6th hole? And then in turn, I think the 7th tee was on the back of that too.
Yeah. Well, the 6th, it's kind of a mid-length par 4. I think it was around 350. It's slightly longer now. But yeah, as I mentioned before, it suffered from this tilted fairway that was high on the right, low on the left. Golfers couldn't hold the fairway, especially shorter hitters. It was just impossibly difficult for shorter hitters. They'd hit their tee shot and everything runs left. And then the green site was really good, but the green itself was pretty awful, really. It was just kind of pushed up and elevated, and there were kind of trees behind the green that blocked what was potentially a spectacular view. So what we did, to fix the fairway, we had to move lots of dirt, basically. We cut on the right, high right, we filled on the low left. And so the fairway's kind of now split into two, with a high right side, with a bit of a drop-off down to a lower left side.
Okay.
It's all short grass, so it's all known as short grass.
Yep.
You can basically make the decision now, do you play down the kind of wider, low left side, or do you play up the higher right side, which is a slightly more difficult shot? We put a bunker at about 250 on the right. So if you play up the right, you've got kind of a more open approach into the green with better visibility. And then the green, we pushed the green back about another 20 metres past where it was. Took the trees out behind the green, and we've now got this really spectacular kind of skyline green. The approach shot in is slightly uphill, so
it looks fantastic. I mean, it messes. I haven't been there, I haven't seen it, but it without having a background that's up close, you as a player, and I've played other holes that are similar to that, where you lose all depth of field judgment. I find when there's nothing behind the green. So you can read the meterage, from your laser sights or from the sprinkler heads or pace it out, whatever you do. But to trust that meterage when you've got nothing behind but open sky is really difficult. There is one tree, though, there, isn't there? I think you've kept.
There is one tree. It's actually back adjacent to the 7th tee, but that tree is kind of iconic at Mornington. It's a variety of pine tree. And it's actually the logo for the golf club as well. So
okay.
We weren't about to cut that one down. But, I guess the strategy of the hole is if you play up the higher right side, you've got a more better visibility of the green. It's still skyline, but basically behind the green, you're seeing just kind of water of the bay and then sky.
That's magic.
And if you play down the kind of lower left side, it's more blind, more uphill. But obviously down the left, you've got more width to aim at from the tee.
And no doubt you've probably solved that issue of the balls running all the way down the left. So now you've got a bit of a more of a playable stance as well. The balls aren't all going to pool in one area far down the bottom. It's a little bit more acceptable for players, I suppose, of all types.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, the fairway, depending on whether you go low left or high right, you'll have no trouble holding the fairway now.
Yep.
So the issue with balls running off into the rough is gone. We've fixed that. We've got a much better green site now. It's a much bigger green. Sits on the ground much more naturally than the old green. We went for a bunkerless green too. We just wanted to keep it really simple.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, so there's a bunker short of the green, about 40 metres short of the green, but the green itself is bunkerless.
Right.
And once you get up there, it looks like a really difficult shot especially from low left.
Yeah.
Because you don't know, as you said, you don't know. You've got to trust the distance that you. So, but when you get up there, there's actually a lot of space. There's a lot of space behind the green. There's probably the green kind of falls away at the back, but there's probably 10 metres of space behind the green. So
it doesn't drop off as soon as you get from the shortcut grass of the green. It doesn't disappear. But that's part of what you do, right? Is that you play on what people can't see sometimes, and it feels scarier than it really is.
Well, that's right. Yeah, that's part of golf course architecture, is trying to make things look difficult, but in reality, that plays easy.
And that I find sometimes in conversations that I've had with people is that they tend to sometimes take that the wrong way. It's like you're out there to do something bad for them as they're playing the golf hole, when that adds to the challenge and the joy, because at the end of the day, that's golf, isn't it? The challenge.
Well, that's right, and it's supposed to be a fun game, not a punishing game.
No, and like I said, it plays with your mind. It's not. It doesn't, in this particular instance on the back of the six, it doesn't drop off to nothing where you lose your ball. It just feels like that's what's behind it. And then when you get there, well, there's that bit of give, so you can play back to the green. But you learn next time when you play it to trust your distance a little bit better, and that's a skill you learn as you get around and learn more of the golf course.
Well, that's right, and the green kind of does fall away at the back, which is kind of unusual. I mean, most greens kind of tilt towards the line of play. Probably the best known is, like the third west at Royal Melbourne. It's not dissimilar to the green like that, where you've got to land your ball short and kind of run it up because everything falls away. But if you lose it over the back, then you're not going to lose your ball or anything. It's just a tricky little chip coming back. Yeah,
nice. And the seventh, it looks like a pretty awesome par 3.
The seventh is a spectacular, longish downhill par 3. We really just rebuilt the tees there. There's two tees. There was a lower tee and an upper tee, and the upper tee just wasn't really big enough. But it's a better shot from the upper tee.
Yeah, okay.
So just as part of doing the sixth green, just kind of from the rear of 6, it just kind of flows naturally onto these new rebuilt tees on 7.
Okay, nice. And that project you mentioned did you work with Darius?
Very much so, yeah.
Okay, so it was a collaborative experience.
Yeah. In fact, you know, a lot of the construction was done during the lockdown when I was ironically in the ACT and couldn't travel back to Melbourne. So I've got to give a lot of the credit during construction to Darius, because we obviously communicated a lot over the telephone and with photographs and video, etc. But for some of the construction, I couldn't actually travel back to Victoria.
Yeah, wow.
Having lived through the lockdown in Melbourne when we lived on the peninsula and not being able to travel to the ACT, it was to look after my Yoani project. It was kind of ironic that the tables turned and I couldn't get back to Melbourne.
Yeah, wow.
Mm.
So, okay, that job there for the 6th hole is completed. It's open for play, and like I said, it looks spectacular. So let's jump to the ACT, and because Yoani's a big name in Canberra.
Yeah, well, Yoani, I think I was appointed around 2018, and that was a really satisfying project to win. They put out an expression of interest and invited, I think, about 6 Australian architectural firms to prepare a concept plan for. Basically, what they were doing was, Yoani's in a kind of in the centre of Canberra in the northern suburbs, and they're on Northbourne Avenue, which is one of the major thoroughfares, the axis that runs down through the centre of Canberra, through Civic, and then continues on to Parliament House.
Yeah, you literally drive straight past the front gate on the way into town.
Well, if you're coming from the Melbourne direction or from Yass, you come down the Barton Highway, and then it's on the corner of the Barton Highway and Northbourne. And Northbourne Avenue has kind of been highlighted by the government as an area they want to develop as kind of more high-density housing.
Ah, okay. So that's why they've run the train up the guts of that road too, isn't it?
Yeah, the tram line. Yeah, so the tram stop is basically right outside of the current clubhouse. So,
Smart
so
move.
the land that their clubhouse sits on, which includes the clubhouse, 2 bowling greens, car parks, a motel, and their maintenance sheds, they're disposing of all that land to a developer. And it's very valuable land because the developer can build up to kind of 6, 8 stories with apartments.
Yeah, wow, okay.
So they're disposing of that, and then obviously they're moving their clubhouse to some new land on the other side of the golf course. So they've purchased some vacant land just near their current 17th green. It's about 2 hectares of land, and they are building a new clubhouse on that land.
Wow.
So the challenge really was how do we reconfigure the golf course to work with that new clubhouse location. So they put out an EOI and asked half a dozen golf course architects just to come up with a basic concept of how that might work. I prepared a concept. I visited the site. I met with them, and then was appointed in 2018 to be their golf course architect. So that was very satisfying, I think, to be chosen on the basis of not just my background and experience, but on the basis that I came up with the solution they liked the most.
Yeah. Oh, mate, I've got no doubt at all. I mean, like I said, I know Yoani's got a very, very good name down there in Canberra, and I've not been there, actually. I've been to a couple of the other places, but Yoani's one of those ones that you hear about every time, and the name's bandied around as one of the stops you must try and get on if you can and are able. So there's obviously a lot of change coming. Has any of that change been able to commence yet in any of its forms, or is there still a bit of processing and things to work through from the club's perspective?
Well, we've actually just finished and are about to submit the DA for the golf course. So
right, okay.
They split the DA for the golf course works and the clubhouse works into 2 different packages. So we're submitting the DA. If all goes to plan, that might take about 6 months. So the plan is to start construction next year. So it'll be starting probably spring, September, October next year. And basically the project's grown bigger from when it commenced to originally it was kind of how do we reconfigure the golf course and do the bare minimum amount of work to the golf course and changes to the golf course to work with the new clubhouse location. But it's kind of evolved from there and become much bigger. So it's now basically a complete rebuild of the entire course.
Bloody hell, that's exciting.
Yeah, so there's about 8 greens that will be relocated as part of reconfiguring the course to work with the new clubhouse location. There's some pretty major reconstruction of lakes and existing lakes and new lakes as well. And then there's probably another 10 greens that don't actually move from where they currently are, but we're going to rebuild them in any case so we get them all up to the same high standard. So, yeah, it's become a big project. So it'll be done in 2 stages.
Yep.
So the first stage will be next year, which will basically be all the work we need to do to have the golf course work with the new clubhouse location. So the new clubhouse will be under construction essentially at the same time. And then once the first stage of all the golf course works are completed, they'll be able to basically pack up and move into the new clubhouse. And then stage 2 will be all the balance of all the other holes.
Wow. So that's going to happen over a little while, mate. You're going to be pretty busy there for a while.
Yeah, it'll be good. Yeah, it's going to have its challenges. Yeah, we've got to keep 9 holes open. So they'll be out playing a 9-hole course from the current clubhouse while we build all the new work. And then they'll move over in year 2 to play all the new holes and while we rebuild the rest of it. So from the members' point of view, they're only going to have a 9-hole golf course for 2 years, which will have its challenges from the club's point of view, I expect.
Yeah, sure.
Mm.
So you've got a place like Yawani, and that's, like I said before, it's a very, very good name in Canberra, held in very high regard. So, and the other one that you've got down that way is Murrumbidgee Golf Club, which is quite a different type of club and golf course.
Yeah, well, Murrumbidgee's on the other side of Canberra, down south, in a suburb called Canberra. And it was built in the early 90s. And a guy called Bob Green, golf course architect, he passed away a few years ago, but he was one of the founding members of our Society of Australian Golf Course Architects.
Okay.
So he planned this course back in, I think it was 1990. And it's a really impressive golf course, actually. It's for a housing development, he did a very good job. It was well done because the front 9 basically plays around a housing development, but he designed it in a way that there's lots of space. I mean, the golf course is on 98 hectares.
Whoa.
So Yawani's probably on less than 50.
Yeah.
So
I remember talking to Superintendent Simon Snedden at Gold Creek, and I think Gold Creek's a similar size. Like, are we talking only 18 holes at Murrumbidgee for an area that big?
Yeah, it's 18 holes. There's probably between most of the holes there'd be, well, on the back 9, at least kind of 50 metres between, from fairway to fairway between holes. So they don't have any safety issues internally or any safety issues to boundaries. There's lots of space. The front 9, despite the fact that it does a big kind of anti-clockwise loop around a housing development, it's probably more impressive, certainly especially than the back 9. Some of the views there are really spectacular.
Wow.
There's a mountain range called the Brindabella Mountains, and the first 5 holes kind of play towards the Brindabellas. And, yeah, so it's a really pretty golf course. And I was appointed there. Just going back to Bob Green's plan. So he designed the golf course and did, the course routing, etc. And it looks to me as though, obviously, Bob knew what he was doing when he designed this course, but the implementation then on the ground, it just looks as though maybe they took his layout plan and he may not have had much involvement during the actual construction because the layout works really well, but the implementation on the ground and the greens they built just aren't as impressive as they could be.
Short of a length, you might say. Not quite up to what you might expect.
It looks as though they got a really good design by Bob and then went and built something as cheaply as they could.
Yeah, right. How many times do you hear that story? I don't mean to laugh, but that is not uncommon.
So it's got the bones of being a really good golf course, but it's really, the green complexes. When the course originally opened, I've just written a report for the club and did a bit of research into the background of the course. And when the course originally opened, they didn't actually build any bunkers.
Okay.
So the bunkers were kind of just added in a very ad hoc way by greens committees or superintendents. Nobody quite knows.
Right. Okay.
But it was pretty clear that not a lot of thought or planning went into where the bunkers were placed. So they appointed me basically to do like a bunker master plan, I called it.
Okay.
They started a couple of years ago rebuilding a couple of their bunkers. They've got the normal issues that we have in Canberra, and a lot of them are silted up, and every time it rains they fill with water, and then it takes 2 days for the water to drain away. So they started rebuilding. They rebuilt 2 of their bunkers next to their 9th green, and they used the modern drainage techniques using capillary concrete, and then they did the echo bunker face as well, because they get a lot of washouts on the face of bunkers. So they rebuilt 2 bunkers, and then I think they must have sat back and thought, well, are we going to continue rebuilding all these bunkers? Some of them feel as though they're not in the right spot, and maybe we should get someone in to have a look at it. So they got me in, and I basically did a bunker master plan for them. And so, over the next few years, we'll be rebuilding some bunkers in the same location, some of the greenside bunkers, the same or similar location. A lot of the fairway bunkers that were built will just be filled in.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, there's other spots. So the total number of bunkers, once it's all finished, will probably be similar to what there is now, but we're putting some of them in new and better locations, adding a bit more strategy to the golf course.
And it's interesting, you talked about the evolution there of the golf course from being designed as such, but then sort of feeling like it was just built by somebody, and bunkers going in or haphazardly and without being rude to Murrumbidgee and the way that it was done in the past, but I've worked on golf courses where that's happened, so I can speak a little bit from experience. And like you said, when it gets to the point where the clubs decide they want to start working on and spending money and bringing those particular pieces of the golf course up to speed, renovating them, getting them reinvigorated, and then they go, well, hang on, if we're going to spend $7-10 grand rebuilding this bunker, well, do we even know if it's worth spending that money on? Should it even be here? So it's not an uncommon thing for golf clubs to question some of those things that have just evolved, in inverted commas, by maybe not the most skilled people in the past. Do you find that golf clubs probably need to, people listening to this are board members, they're committee members, they're regulars at golf clubs. Should they, sometimes think about asking that question within their own club as, do we know that these things are in the right place, and how did they even get here? Maybe they're not. Maybe they could be done better. Yeah,
well, that's right. I mean, we see this with every golf club, and designing golf courses has its challenges. I mean, every golfer is kind of an expert in golf course design, I guess. So we're regularly dealing with greens committees where, there's a guy that plays off 2 on the greens committee, and he thinks all the bunkers should be 260 metres from the tee. The lady that plays off 27 will never be in it or never be able to reach it. So it's always challenging, balancing where to place bunkers and stuff, to cater for the +2 marker that bombs at 270 and the elderly gentleman that only hits at 150. So it's challenging, and dealing with greens committees can be challenging. But my advice would be that guys like me and other members of our Society of Golf Course Architects have many years' experience doing this, and so consulting one of us is a wise thing to do.
Oh, mate, look, I don't disagree with you all. I think absolutely it's what what the clubs need to do, and I put it to akin to what I used to do as a superintendent. Everyone's got a lawn at home. Everyone cuts their own grass at home, and every now and then we get someone that walks in and says, "Steve, you're not doing it right. This is that green that's not right. It should be done better. What are you doing out there on the fairways, mate? This is how that's what happens because we're all experts because we've all got it at home, and sometimes that's not the best way forward, and it's not quite correct either. And I will be a little bit blunt in saying that because, like you said, if you want to understand and talk to people with experience and experts in the field, you go out there and seek those people. And you guys, being the members of the Society of Australian Golf Course Architects, are those people when it comes to architecture. And I know that, in my opinion, if a golf club is looking to question some of those parts of their golf course, there's no point asking, the champion of last year's, of the golf club, the A-grade winner, and saying, hey, listen, Darren, what's, we're looking and talking about the first last week. You got to go and talk to the right people to get the best out of it. If you're going to spend money at the end of the day, and this is me talking, clubs need to spend the money in the right way. It's not falling out of their back pockets. They need to get the most out of it, and getting the right people involved at the beginning, in my opinion, is what they should be doing.
Exactly right.
Mate, I know that you've recently done some travelling in Tassie. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're up to down there? Was it just to go and play around at Barnbugle, or is there a bit of work involved somewhere around there?
A bit of work involved down there, yeah. So I'm working mainly down there at Tasmania Golf Club. So that project came about. I was actually down there on holiday.
So you were down there playing
years ago, and my wife was reading the newspaper, and she read a story about how they were going to duplicate the Tasman Highway, put in this huge roundabout, and plough through Tasmania Golf Club's course, and how it was going to ruin their 16th hole and the demise of the club.
Wow.
So I happened to be in Tasmania at the time, so I thought, and Tasmania Golf Club's right next to the airport, and I think we were about to fly back to Melbourne. So I contacted them and I said, do you want me to come past and just have a look? I've just read this article in the paper. So they said, yeah, sure, come past and have a talk to us. So I had a look at the situation, and basically the plans that were in the paper showed this the Tasman Highway is the main highway from Hobart to the east coast of Tasmania. So anyone travelling towards the east coast, or there's a suburb there called Sorell as well, has to use the Tasman Highway. And the Tasman Highway most afternoons just turns into a car park, traffic jam all the way back past the airport. And so the government had to duplicate it, take it from 2 lanes to 4 lanes, and in doing so also kind of straighten it in a few spots. So that's, Tasmania Golf Club shares a boundary with the Tasman Highway. Their main access to the clubhouse is off the highway. So it was going to have a big impact on the golf course, and they were going to compulsorily acquire some of their land, mainly the current 16th hole, which is a long par 5 that plays kind of downhill from a high tee, and then their driving range, which plays from the clubhouse towards the highway, and then their first green and second tees as well were all potentially impacted.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and they were moving the boundary or the highway so far into the 16th hole that, well, initially I was kind of appointed by the government's engineers, Pitt and Sherry, to look into whether we could put up high screen fences. So I prepared a report and said, yeah, they'd have to be X meters high and 500 meters long, and I worked out the costings, etc. And so that was always one option. But the problem was that they were moving the boundary so far that the fence or the screen would literally have been on the edge of the 16th fairway. So it would have just wrecked the hole completely. So then I started looking at other options, and between the 16th hole and their 17th hole is their main water storage lake.
Right.
It's kind of one of those turkey nest dams. And so I thought, well, the only way to move the 16th hole is to put it where the dam is. So the initial plan was basically to flip the two, fill in the existing dam, build a new dam where the 16th fairway currently is, and then put the 16th fairway through where the dam is. So that was the original plan. And then the government engineers went away and kind of worked on more detail for the highway design, came back, and they'd moved the boundary another 10 metres.
Nothing like having you start from scratch again.
Yeah, so now it's like, well, we haven't even got enough space to move the dam. We could still fill in the existing dam and move the 16th hole across to where it is, but there was no space for the new dam, which is their main 20 megalitre water storage. So then we had to start looking at a new location, and so the new dam's now going on the other side of the 17th hole into some vacant land that they're not currently using. So that's how the project started. So I've been working on that for a couple of years. It's been held up, not because of anything to do with the golf course, but they've got to also acquire some land from the federal government where the airport is, and there's some orchards on the other side of the highway too that are impacted. So we're slowly getting there, but probably the most pleasing thing about that job was, it was kind of tricky in the beginning, I guess, because my client was not the golf club. My client was Pitt and Sherry, who's the engineers for the government. So, but I always wanted to look after the golf club's interests. So I had this interesting kind of balance to find between, looking after the interests of the Tasmanian taxpayer that at the end of the day was going to be paying for all this, but also looking after the interests of the golf club. And obviously, as a golf course architect, I wanted to get the very best outcome for the golf club. So it was kind of pleasing that, the way it unfolded, that I always kind of had the support of the golf club, and now I'm, also very pleased that they've appointed me directly to prepare a master plan for the balance of the golf course, and they're looking at upgrading the entire course.
Wow, that's exciting because it's in a pretty good location. I mean, apart from the duplication of the highway right adjacent to it, it's on. It's like you mentioned, not far from Hobart Airport, so that puts it in the vicinity of Royal Hobart and the new to be built, or it's currently being constructed, 7 Mile Beach. A nice little group of golf courses there that we'll be able to just fly into and play all together. But Tasmania's in a nice little spot with water on one side as well. Is that right?
Yeah, it's basically surrounded in water. It's on a peninsula looking out over. It's called Pittwater. So there's water views from nearly every hole.
Wow, nice. I've not been there.
The character of Tasmania Golf Club's really changed over the last decade or so. It used to be quite a heavily treed course, and then it went through a couple of droughts and it suffered from a lot of dieback in the trees. So a huge number of trees were removed.
Okay.
Really, everyone I talk to just says it's so much better now than it used to be, because it's really opened up these vistas and views across the golf course and across water. So
that's what I was about to ask you, mate. I was about to say more often than not, is when trees go missing, it's better. So the question was going to be, is it better?
It is definitely better. There's still quite a lot of trees on the course, but the trees tend to be now in areas that are kind of out of play, whereas a lot of the fairways used to have trees between them.
Yeah, okay, yep.
So as part of the master plan, I'm encouraging to kind of, if you're going to plant trees, plant them in these kind of out of play areas. One example, between the first, second and sixth holes, there's kind of a triangle inside those holes, which is kind of native bushland. So I'm encouraging them to kind of enhance those areas, but not plant trees between fairways. So if you end up in the treed areas, it's kind of lost ball. but between golf holes, it's a much more kind of open, sparse landscape.
Yeah, nice.
So, yeah, I'm in the process of preparing the course master plan, which is going to be, we're not rebuilding greens or anything. We're mainly looking at bunkers, the location of bunkers, the visibility of bunkers. The course is kind of unique too. There's actually not any fairway bunkers on the course. So
wow, that is interesting.
Yeah, it was designed by Al Howard back in 1971. And, so he didn't put any fairway bunkers in. But obviously back then it was kind of completely different character and quite heavily treed. So my argument to the club now is that they should consider fairway bunkers, and the master plan will be proposing that there be some fairway bunkers just to add a bit more strategy to some of the holes. And they're going to look at putting in a new irrigation system too. So there's the opportunity to put a lot more width into some of the fairways as well.
Yep.
Possibly link some of the fairways as well.
It sounds very exciting for Tasmania Golf Club.
Yeah, there's a lot happening down there, and Tasmania Golf Club, like a lot of clubs post-pandemic, are really busy and going well. So, I'm presenting this draft master plan to the members in early September, and it'll be really exciting to, firstly, start the first project, which will be the 16th and part of the 17th hole and the driving range work and the new first green. So that'll probably happen next year as well. So I might be a busy boy next year with you and Tasmania underway.
You'll have to 3D print another version of yourself, maybe. You're going to be busy in the ACT and then down there. And mate, it sounds exciting. That's another good part of. I think Tassie's going through this boom. When we talked about in the past, I've reported on a few other bits and pieces happening around, and we know 7 Mile's carrying probably the flag the most at the moment, but it's got barn bugles and the like as well. So. But to have Tasmania Golf Club that is looking at this type of work and a master plan improvements to the golf course, that's exciting. And mate, it sounds like it's a really good thing. Great stuff to hear.
There is a fair bit happening down in Tassie. I've got another job up in Launceston too, I should mention, at Launceston Golf Club, which is another really nice course that's looking at doing some improvements. So,
mate, you are busy.
It's pretty nice to be able to go down there and fly into Hobart and hop in the car and drive up to Launceston, which is a beautiful drive, and then back down to Hobart. So, I've got 2 really exciting projects down there.
There you go. You'll have to keep me posted so I can keep reporting to everyone on my Walking the Fairways segment, which is the news segment of the podcast. So I let everyone know what's happening around the country in golf courses. So, man, as they start to Iowanis and Murrumbidgees and Tasmania and Launceston, you just keep me informed, mate. Just a text message and some photos.
Well done.
And we'll keep getting it out there. Now, mate, I've got a couple more things I want to talk about, and one of them is actually, I know that in the past you've done some work in Perth, and this is a bit of a question about the Perth and WA region, I suppose. You've done work there in the past. I know that at the moment you're doing a bit of work at Kwinana, which I think has recently just opened that work on the golf course there. I'm a bit curious because I've not been to Perth for golf. And I've not seen any golf courses. I've seen plenty of photos and read plenty of things and spoken to people about it. Superintendent Matthew Souls over there at Royal Perth and the like. And, mate, I'm curious, because of your bit of experience over there and having done stuff, I'm wondering your opinion, I suppose. Is Perth and that southwest corner of WA, is that a bit of an underrated sort of golf destination in your opinion? You've got, like I said, I keep going back to you've got experience there. What do the golf courses present with? Is it as good as the East Coast and some of the stuff? Because I know they've got sandy sites on some of the courses and the like. Do we underrate Perth? Do we not talk about it enough? What are your thoughts?
Look, we probably don't talk about it enough, but I'm not sure whether underrated is the correct word that I'd use.
Okay.
There's some great land for golf in Perth. All of Perth is basically sand. Up north especially, there's some virgin land that I've seen that you could do the most spectacular golf courses along the coast there north of Perth if you were able to. And But in terms of the existing courses, obviously you've got Lake Carrinyup, which kind of stands out as the number one Perth course. But other than that, there's some good tracks, but given the quality of the land, if you compare it to the Melbourne Sandbelt, for example, then you could probably pick up Lake Carrinyup and drop it in Melbourne and it wouldn't even be in the top 10 courses. And likewise, you could take a course from Melbourne, an unheralded course such as like a Woodlands or a Spring Valley, and drop that into Perth, and it's probably the number one course. So,
interesting sentiments.
Yeah, underrated. Look, that's not to say that there's some really good golf over there. I mean, Royal Fremantle's a nice track. WA is a nice WA Golf Club is a nice track. Mount Lawley. They're all strong courses, but they're probably just not in the league of, certainly Lake Carrinyup or the stuff you'd see in Melbourne on similar terrain.
I think. And then go on.
If you head south of Perth, some of the kind of more touristy areas, I guess down south, Secret Harbour, and the Cut is a spectacular course, but pretty tough. Then there's Kennedy Bay, where I think Graham Marsh has done some new work recently.
They're in the middle of redoing all that.
Yeah, and then there's some. I've worked at a couple of public courses over there at Carramar, which is up in the city of Wanneroo in the north suburbs. Carramar and Barangaroo, and I did a little 9-hole course out on Rottnest Island a few years ago that I'm very, very proud of as well.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So, but I'll be as you mentioned, Kwinana Golf Club. We just opened the new 6th green, and in the process of designing the new 3rd green, and so I'll be getting over there in the next few weeks to have a look at it and
nice.
See the new 6th green, which unusually I'm yet to see because it was built again during the lockdown when we couldn't travel over to Perth. So I'm looking forward to seeing it.
It's getting over to WA is a little bit of a different scenario to the rest of Australia because they put up a giant wall.
It's a long way to go, too.
It is. I like I said, I had Superintendent Matthew Soles from Royal Perth, he's a Sydney boy, and he got the gig over there at Royal Perth, and he was telling us about how the difficult and extremely long and tough process was just to get over there, and he was moving there for work permanently.
I heard about his challenges, actually. Yeah.
Oh, mate, honestly, anyway, life's a lot easier, I think. Well, I think it is to get over there and get back anyway, mate. So at least you'll be able to go and see it. But no, the reason I asked that question is because we don't talk about that area, and maybe it's been. We don't talk about it because it's been missed by some opportunities. I'm not sure. Maybe there's not it is a long way from the East Coast. I don't know, but I don't know a lot about it. And I hear a lot of people, and you just said it then, that it's got great golf land for golf courses, but it hasn't converted, and I don't know. That's why I say underrated. Maybe more conversations I'll have with people, and we'll learn more about WA. But I want to hear more about it, and why we don't talk about it intrigues me as to why we talk about the sandbelts of the world. So
yeah. Look, Perth's a beautiful spot to visit, so I'd encourage you to get over there and study some of those courses for yourself.
There you go. Very good. Very good. Now, one last question I've got for you, Ben, if you'll indulge me in this one. Your website has a quote on it, and I loved this quote when I saw it, and I'm going to read it to you and get I've got a question for you about it. And the quote is, "Behind every great golf course is a bold designer with a vision." Great quote. I love it. I don't know where you got it from. I don't know if it's yours. It could well be yours. Is it yours?
I think it's my marketing manager's quote.
Oh, okay. Well, look, I liked it.
A.A. my wife.
Oh, that's even better. Well, I think it's fantastic.
Yeah.
I liked it. And my question... Go on.
She's kind of runs my website, so I'll credit her with that one.
There you go. But my question is, because it intrigued me when I read that, and I think a lot of people probably don't disagree with that as a statement, but my question is, are we seeing less bold designers or more bold designers in a modern world do you think of golf course design and architecture? And maybe that's tied to the clientele potentially of the people that golf course architects and designers work for. What are your thoughts on that? Are we seeing more bold moves and bold designs out there?
Yeah, I guess it depends on your definition of what a bold design is.
There you go.
If we look back to kind of my definition of a bold design might be some of the stuff that Pete Dye did, for example, back in the 80s and 90s. Some of the really, heavily contoured greens that he did, and the bunker shapes and the railroad tiers, etc., that he put in bunkers. I guess that's bold. And nowadays, I think the boldest thing that golf course architects can do is kind of less rather than more. In fact, less is often more. And, designing golf courses that are low key compared to, for example, some of the stuff that was done in the 90s where, they were over bunkered and, artificial mounding was put in, etc. So I think the boldest thing to do now as golf course architects sometimes is just to say less is more, and to try and tone down things like the number of bunkers and think about the maintainability and sustainability of golf courses more. So, and sometimes, you present a plan to a club, for example, and you say, well, I'll give you an example. My new 13th hole at Ioane is going to be bunkerless. My new 7th hole there is going to be bunkerless as well, because I just don't feel they're needed.
Interesting.
Water in place, but convincing. Sometimes, you say, well, there's no bunkers around that green, and they kind of look at you like, what? You've got to have bunkers around a green. It's like, no, you don't. So I think, the bold things that we can do now is to try and convince people that not to overdo it, to keep it simple.
So the boldness is it could well be in the decisions, the decision process of whether to do something or not to do something at all, and stick to your guns.
Exactly.
Interesting concept, mate. That's a different angle to looking at it, because I know when I've had conversations, and I need to speak of my experience in talking with people who are golfers, and some people like my old Chris, my former assistant superintendent with me working at Katoomba, who wasn't a golfer, but he was a great greenkeeper, and we often had the discussion about bunkers and how much work's in them. Should it go? Should it stay? But you're probably, when you have conversations with clubs there that you mentioned, and I've got no doubt having a conversation with a golf club when you're doing a master plan to say that those golf holes, not just green sites, won't have a bunker on them, and to I suppose defend the reasoning behind doing that and putting that idea forward. Most people are going to say every green complex should have at least one bunker somewhere, shouldn't it?
Yeah, and I think just also there's been a move away from trying to build sandbelt bunkers on a clay site, for example, and I'm probably guilty of it myself with that first project I mentioned in China, where you've got all these kind of capes and bays and convoluted shapes and long walk-ins and tongues, etc. Moving away from that to a much simpler, more elegant word I mentioned earlier, style of bunkering too, I think is something that I'm certainly looking at doing with my projects.
Interesting stuff. I do love bunker talk. We could go down that one very far. It's you talk about the intricacies and the bits and pieces, because clubs now are really putting dollar signs on bunkers, aren't they, when they look at them and when they have to maintain them?
You'd know more about this than I do, but every superintendent I talk to just is like, tone down on the bunkers. It's like, that's like 20% of the cost and time of maintaining a golf course is focused on bunkers. So,
oh, mate, it's madness. But one of the things, I suppose it could be a bit of a funny turn at the moment, is with these new bunker lining products, the way that water drains through the sand doesn't hit a base, it just keeps going. So the sand really doesn't move. I've seen photos from Superintendent Mick Pascoe up at Noosa, and all the rain that they had up there during the wet period, they've just had some bunkers redone, and it didn't flood. So that wasn't the issue, but just the amount of rain that just kept coming from the sky, and the bunkers didn't move. So have we got to potentially to a point where I don't know, will it open up that imagination again because bunkers are being waterproofed, as it were, stormproofed, as it were, potentially? You know, do we see that? I know we're talking about doing less, but I wonder, is the way that bunker construction has gone now with some of these incredible bunker lining products, that the way that they drain, are we opening back up to the idea of a little bit more detail and intricacy in the maintenance that's involved in bunkers again? I don't know. Just putting it out there.
Possibly, but I guess, there's the maintainability on the one hand, but there's the cost of building these bunkers too.
True.
And, I mean, those products you mentioned, a lot of golf clubs will never be able to afford that kind of stuff, or if they do can afford it, it's very much a kind of a staged program of rebuilding. So, look, I hope we don't. Look, I think golf course design's in a good space at the moment, a good place. So I hope we don't end up kind of going back to that kind of convoluted shapes that we used to see.
I love the less is more line. It's in my head. It's bouncing around.
Well, that's certainly my approach with what I've done with Ioane with the master plan, and what I'm proposing to do at Tassie and other projects that I'm working on, especially on clay sites. It's all very well if you're working on pure sand, and you don't need these kinds of products, drainage products in your bunkers, then you can obviously be a bit more kind of elaborate with what you do, with sandy waste areas and these shapes of bunkers that we see on the sand belt. But on clay sites, I just don't think you can do it anymore.
And that's probably a limitation to just a site in general, right? You've got to. Does the site dictate to you the design elements and aspects and things that you can attack with and put in, and the design flair that you can have? Is that somewhat? I suppose it would be, wouldn't it?
Well, I mean, there's a reason why most new golf courses in Australia nowadays are built on sand. The ones on King Island, the one you mentioned at 7 Mile Beach, new courses that are proposed on Kangaroo Island, they're all on sand. And, there's a reason for that, because the cost of building on sand is probably a quarter of what it is to build on clay. So from a design point of view, if you're designing greens on clay, you've got to think about cost far more than some of these wonderful sites on sand.
Very good insight, Ben. Well, look, Ben, on that note, I will thank you very kindly for your time and insight into your. What a great! I love the start. I'm still thinking about that conversation you had in the restaurant. It's just a great way in. But mate, you've got some great experience under your belt in your time that you spent over in Asia. Some incredible sites by the sounds of it. I'm curious when I'll write some of these names down. I'll get some of these things off you and have a look at them on Google Earth, because that intrigues me to know in looking at that type of thing. But mate, look. And some incredible work happening in Australia. I very much have been blown away by the extent of the places that you've worked and your career to date. And it's very interesting to see that we've got you back here doing some of that work and using that experience on bringing up some of our golf courses around Australia now and helping them move forward, which has got me really excited as well, in the likes of Tasmania and Ioane and so on, mate. So look, thank you very much for your time, Ben. It's been great having you on, the first one of the new version of the design brief, and I appreciate your time and insight, mate, into everything involved, and I look forward to one day having you again on soon.
I'm very happy to do it anytime, Steve, and I've enjoyed this immensely, so thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ben. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. What did you think of that? Ben is a great bloke. Ben Davey from Contour Golf. We had a great time chatting away, as you could tell, and something different there. A few different questions at the end, a little bit more philosophical about Australian golf course design, and it's really, really interesting to chat to an architect like Ben and get a bit of an insight, and certainly to showcase to you guys who Ben Davey is and who Contour Golf are, and a bit of background behind Ben and his career, how he got to where he is today, and it's just a great insight. I certainly get a great lot of information out of chatting to people like Ben, and that's the idea of this new expanded version of the design brief, where, like I said at the beginning, the idea is to talk to members of the Society of Australian Golf Course Architects and show you guys out there, people interested in Australian golf course architecture, people interested in golf course architecture in general, golfers wanting to learn more, greenkeepers out there listening that want to understand more and bits and pieces as well. That's the idea, is to pass this information on and chat to new people and bring their information to you, bring their stories to you. And at the end of the day, it's to learn more. And we love also, I certainly love also hearing their stories and bringing that to light as well, which is I think it's a wonderful thing, and I think there's a lot of information there, and a lot of background stuff in the careers of people like Ben, which is what I want to bring to you more of, and that's the idea. So I'm going to be talking to more members of the Society of Australian Golf Course Architects, and don't forget to check out their website if you want to know more. You can go to sagca.org.au. That's their website, to go and find out some more information about other members that you'll see on the website, members of the society that we have in Australia that are doing work all over the world. All over the world. Some you've heard of, some you haven't heard of, projects that you probably don't even know that they're working on in Australia and around the world. And that's where you go for Australian architects to find out who they are and where they're working and what work they are doing and what work they've done. So it's something that I'm working with them to bring to you through the podcast, and I'm very excited by it and very appreciative that they've opened up the society to my podcast, to be able to talk to them and bring their stories and bring their information out to you, to the audience out there listening who are interested in it. And don't forget, you can find more information about Ben Davey and Contour Golf at their website, at Ben's website, contourgolf.com.au. If you could, as always, I'd really want to know more from you, so please write a review, get in touch with me, leave me a message, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever works, guys. I'm on all the platforms there. Love hearing from you, and I really want to know what your thoughts are on it. That was the first one with Ben Davey. I've got plenty more lined up. There's so many Australian architects that I want to chat with, and I want to be able to just keep bringing it out to you as time goes on, and I get a chance to catch up with them. They're all very, very busy, which is so good to hear, and I've been chatting to quite a number of them in the short term, and got some great people lined up, and there's plenty more to come. So great stuff that I'll be able to bring to you. And like I said, I appreciate the members of the Society of Australian Golf Course Architects to open themselves up to being interviewed and chatting with me on all sorts of different topics. Like I said, their careers and their work and the like as well, and philosophical questions just the same. And one final note, don't forget there is sponsorship available of certain segments of the podcast. So if you are interested, if you're a business out there in the golf industry, in any part of the greenkeeping industry, golf industry, architecture industry, whatever part of golf in the broader sense, and you want to get your message out there, get it heard by the audience that I speak to, feel free to get in touch with me. You can email me at thegolfinggreenkeeper@gmail.com, or get in touch with me with my socials, like I mentioned before, on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter. Feel free to do so, but they are still available. I've had quite a bit of interest, but I'm also letting you know that if you are interested, get in touch with me, and we can certainly sort that out with you to promote your brand and get your name out there in front of as many people as possible, to just showcase what you are, who you are, and what you are offering, which is what I'm all about. As being part of this, we can certainly get your message out there far and wide. That's the goal for you. Thank you for listening. As always, you hit them clean, we'll keep them green. Don't forget to leave a review, and I'll catch up with you very soon.